Welcome back to the show. I am so glad that you guys are following along as we are renovating our small bathroom on the second floor of our house. I really hope you've had a chance to watch all the previous videos and to see the journey that we've made all the way up to this point. So as I said in yesterday's episode, it was a turning point. It was a point at which we went from the destruction part of the job to the construction part of the job. It's the point at which we're starting to make the bathroom our own. And so today is an exciting day because we finally got an opportunity to paint the walls. And I'm just so elated because that was the original project that we signed up for way back last Saturday. And it hasn't actually been, 5 days. It's been a couple extra days because we had to wait for certain things to happen. But this is basically going to be, the next day of work for us. And as I said, we've got the walls painted. So without further ado, I'm just going to let you jump right into that and see what we got accomplished. And after that's all done, we're going to actually sit down and look at all the tools that you're going to need when you want to tackle a project like this. Maybe you haven't painted before. Maybe you don't know what you're going to need. So I'm going to give you some of the basics today. Maybe not everything you might need, but most of the things that you're going to need to get your job done as well. So let's just jump in and check out and see what I got done today. All right, welcome back to this little micro renovation on a budget. Just to let you know what I've got done today, we have the walls two-coated with paint. This is an antique white satin made by Dutch Boy. I think I've shown you guys that before. So the walls are now two-coated. They also have a primer layer underneath that, which is the bullseye, which I used. So the walls are now basically finished. There's a few touch-up spots I need to hit yet. I also have the baseboard put on. This is the new baseboard that we're using. And we are ready for the floor. The floor came in. So I'm going to be working on the floor today. As you can see, that subfloor is ready to go for the new floor. And once we have the new floor put in, I can then work on putting on the faux brick wall for this wall right here. I have brick panels that were purchased in order to cover this wall. I put the valves on here because I needed to have the water on in the house, and I knew that it was going to take some time. I wanted to have the floor in before I put the bricks up because I didn't want the floor to have a gap where the brick wall would be. In case I wanted to take the faux brick down, the floor would still go all the way to the wall. So I had to wait for the floor to come in before I put up the faux brick wall. And because it took several days for the floor to get in, I didn't want to have the water off in the house that long, not having decent valves on. So the valves went on first. But that means now that I'm going to have to do some creative cutting on the faux brick in order to get the pieces over these areas here. This particular area I'm not too concerned with because this is going to be behind an enclosed vanity. So you won't even notice that there will be a hole cut out for all the pipe work here. But this area here will be exposed and visible. So what I'm going to have to do, excuse me, is make a little arch cut to get the panel on over that pipe and then basically glue the bottom part down and hope that the cut mark isn't too visible. It's going to be behind the toilet, so you won't really notice it anyway. And there's also going to be a baseboard over the brick once it's up. So really, you're probably not even going to notice that the cut was there, but I will have to make that cut because cutting around this flange that I put over the pipe for decorative purposes would make a very large hole in the brick, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to be doing some creative cutting with that. But first, today we are going to be laying our vinyl plank flooring. I'm going to show you what that looks like in the package, and we're going to get this down today. So, those walls look pretty good. I'm pretty happy with them. You know, if you notice that they are painted white, that was an option that was my wife's idea. She wanted to have the room in all white, and I wanted to make sure I painted everything, all four walls, before we put up that brick wall that I was talking about in the previous episodes. The reason why I wanted to do that is because if she ever decided that she wanted to take that brick wall out, I'd still have a painted wall underneath. Now, you might have noticed in the video that there were a few little imperfections in the wall behind the sink and the toilet. Well, the reason why I wasn't too concerned about that is because it's behind the brick wall. I can always touch those up if she decides to take that brick wall down. But I wasn't going to go and get too concerned about every little detail in that particular wall, because it wasn't worth the time to worry about all that. I'm putting the brick over it anyway, as long as the wall is protected. Because if you remember from the previous episode, I said that the whole point behind having a coating was to protect the walls, not just make them look nice. So you want to make sure, especially if you're doing a bathroom, you want to make sure that your bathroom is completely sealed. You know, you're going to have that moisture, you're going to have that humidity. You know, whenever you're taking a shower, you have standing water in your toilet, or you're using your sink and things get steamy, that humidity is going to rise up. It's going to attach to the walls. It's going to seep in if you don't have the right protective coating on your walls. And that over time will cause your walls to degrade, get soft, and you'll have to eventually replace your drywall, or maybe some of the tape in between the pieces of drywall might start to come off, which I have in the other bathroom. When I do that bathroom, I'll be sure to bring you along for that. But you want to make sure that your walls are properly coated and protected. So we decided to go with a satin for the walls, and I decided to use an eggshell for the ceiling. Now, you might be wondering what those are. Maybe you've never painted before. Maybe you're not too familiar with what paint is. So I'm going to give you a rundown on that today. So we had to do at least 2 coats on everything. Okay, that made sure we covered up all that nasty old color that we had on there before. And especially if you're doing white. You know, there are some paints out there that are very expensive and they're very thick, and you might be able to cover your previous color with 1 coat. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of coatings out there, a lot of paints nowadays that actually have primer built into them. And that's great. You know, if you can find one of those and you don't mind paying the extra money for that nice, thick, expensive paint, you might be able to get your walls to cover in 1 coat. But in a lot of cases, especially when you're painting white, or if you're painting over something that has a lot of yellow in it, which yellow, just so you know, yellow is a very hard color to cover. So anytime your dye has a lot of yellow in it, you're going to notice that the color will still want to bleed through. So you might find that any of the colors that are currently on your wall, they have a lot of yellow in them, you're probably going to have to do them 2 coats. And it's just how the paint world works. So keep that in mind when you're choosing how much paint to purchase. Consider the number of coats you're planning to put on the wall. Now, in a small bathroom like ours, we don't have to worry about that too much because we have to buy a gallon. A quart won't do it. And a gallon will be more than enough for 2 coats. So in our case, a gallon worked just fine. The paint that we used for the walls was the Dutch Boy Platinum Plus. Now, I am not in any way suggesting that you should go out and buy Dutch Boy, because we also use Pittsburgh. I also use Sherwin-Williams and ICI. There's a number of good paints out there. This is not a commercial for any one of those companies at all. I'm just giving you an example of what the paint looks like when you purchase it. This type of container is going to be a screw top plastic container. It comes with a handle on it. You can grab a hold of it when you're in the store and just throw it right in the cart. most paint stores where you purchase paint, even Walmart nowadays, you can actually custom color your paint. And that's as simple as just asking the representative at that store to give you the color that you choose on your card. And in many cases, they'll have, especially if you're using a paint, what they call a paint chip. The paint chip is the little piece of paper that has the colors on it that you're choosing. If the paint chip is from the store that you choose to purchase the paint at, then you're lucky because they already have that in their computer and they won't have to do custom matching. The custom matching process is when they actually have to put it on a little computer and shine light on it and get the color exact as possible. So try to choose a paint chip from the same store that you're purchasing the paint from. But that's not always the case and not always possible, because you might find a color from a different store, but you want to get a store A's paint, but you have a chip from store B, and that's okay. They can color match that as well. Sometimes the color may not be 100%, it might be 99%. It depends on their computer, depends on how good they do, but most of the time you're going to get the color that you ask for. But you purchase the paint, okay? And basically all you have to do is just tell the representative what type of paint you want. Like in this case, you want a Dutch Boy. This is Platinum, I think it's Platinum Plus. Yeah, Dutch Boy Platinum Plus Eggshell. All right, in this particular case, I want a Dutch Boy Platinum Plus Eggshell. And then you ask them for whatever color you wanted to tint to. In this particular case, this is our ceiling paint, and I did not need that tinted, so I just chose a standard white that came in the gallon jug. That's perfectly fine. You can take it right off the shelf. If you need to get your paint custom colored, they may have to choose a different base color in order to color your paint, and let them do that. As long as you let them know the type of paint you want, Dutch Boy Platinum Plus, you tell them the sheen that you want, which I'm going to go over, and then you give them your color chip, they will give you the right gallon of paint most of the time, unless they're dimwits, but that's for another story. Anyway, so in the particular case of our bathroom, we chose an eggshell for the ceiling and we chose a satin for the walls. Now, you might be wondering, what's an eggshell? What's a satin? What's a flat? What's a semi-gloss? Basically what that is that is the sheen that is built into the paint coating itself. A flat has very little or no protective sheen built into it to protect your walls. An eggshell, which is the next level up, is still a very dull paint, but it does have some level of protective coating built in. There is just a little bit of sheen in it. The satin is the next level, which is much more bright. So the more sheen you have in the paint, the more protective coating you have in the paint, the brighter it's going to look on your walls. So for a wall, I always recommend a satin. But you can also go with an eggshell if the room is just too bright and you don't want to have too much reflection from the lights in the room. If you notice that your room is reflecting a lot of light, you might want to tone that down to an eggshell. And then, of course, you have above that, you have what's called a semi-gloss. A semi-gloss is a very shiny paint that has a lot of protection built into it. But beware, if you paint a semi-gloss, that paint is very difficult to paint, number one. It's going to be very shiny on your walls. Your walls are going to reflect a lot of light. Number two, and number three, this builds on the difficulty in using semi-gloss. You can have a situation where you roll on one layer of paint, and by the time you get the second layer on, the first roll has already started to dry. So the second roll, which overlaps just by a little bit, by an inch or so, all right, makes a thicker layer of paint. So when you have a thicker layer of paint, it's going to shine at a different level. So when you're painting a semi-gloss, if you don't keep what they call a wet edge, where the paint is wet all the way along the wall, all the way to the corner, you might find you have strips in your wall. And that's because the paint is drying faster than you can actually get it applied. Now, when you use flat or eggshell or even satin, you don't really have to worry about that too much because it doesn't have enough sheen built into it to cause that one little line to flash. And if you remember what I mentioned before, flash is when you see something that has more of one sheen than the other. So one part has sheen, one part does not. That's called flashing in the paint world. So if you use semi-gloss, you might run into a strip of flash. But again, I would not recommend putting semi-gloss on the walls. I would limit your semi-gloss use to trim use only because it's a smaller area. You can get it on faster, and it'll allow the trim to pop. So when you look at the wall and you look at the trim, if you're painting the trim and not staining it, you look at the trim, it's going to pop. It's going to come out at you because it's got more sheen. It's going to reflect more light. So when you look at, let's say in the instance of our bathroom, okay, we have a white wall and a white trim. Now, if you look at the video, I think I have it shown in there, but you may not see it. But when you see the final video, you'll notice it for sure now that you are ready to think about it. You'll notice that the baseboard looks a little brighter. It looks a little flashier. It looks a little, like it's reflecting more light. And that's because it's painted in semi-gloss. So I would limit semi-gloss use to trim work and then use your eggshell or satin for your walls. Now your ceiling, you could either use flat, which has almost no protective sheen built into it whatsoever, or in our case, we went ahead and used eggshell. Eggshell we used because we needed that protective sheen to protect against the humidity that builds up in the bathroom. And even though it does have a little bit of sheen, you don't have to worry about the lines showing up when the paint starts to dry. And if you need to touch up later, for instance, with an eggshell or a satin, you can actually touch up the wall and you won't really see the touch up. But if you have semi-gloss on the wall, and it dries, and you notice the next day, hey, you know what? That area there needs a little bit more paint because it's not, thick enough. You go to touch that up, that touch-up spot is going to show. And again, it's because you're layering the paint, and the paint is now flashing. So keep that in mind. That's the difference between sheens: flat, eggshell, satin, and semi-gloss. As I said, we use eggshell for the ceiling, satin for the walls, and semi-gloss for the trim. Now, along the lines of prep work, you've seen some of the prep work that we've done. You've seen how the walls have been sanded and prepped, and I added joint compound where necessary. I sanded it all down. I'm going to do a video on actual sanding for you. Again, these videos are just to show you the process of refinishing a bathroom, not to do each specific step, okay? So right now I'm just showing you all of what it takes to go into refinishing a bathroom. I'm going to make a video on how to actually sand the walls correctly and some of my tips and techniques that I use, but sanding is obviously something that you need to do before applying your paint. So you want to sand the walls, and what I use is a 3M sanding sheet. Okay, this is right here, and again, I am not in any way endorsing this product. I'm not getting paid by any of these companies. It's just what I use. And 3M sanding sheets have always been very reliable for me. You can purchase them in a thin package where they have 10 or 8 or 10 or whatever, 5 sheets in this one here, okay? And basically each sheet, all right, has a number on it. On the back, you're going to see it says P150. 150 stands for the grit of sandpaper. And they have the higher the number, the finer the grit. So when you do your initial sanding, you want to have a lower number, 120, 150. When you do your final sanding before your final coat of paint, that's when you're sanding with a 240, a P240. And you can buy a package, the general use package, that has a number of different grits built into the packaging. So as you take them out, you have one or two 120s, one or two 180s, and then one or two 240s. And then you have everything that you need to sand your walls. Now you can use a sanding sponge as well. I don't have one of those, but just so you know, those sanding sponges work very well. Just watch your grit number. Again, the lower the number, the rougher the grit. The higher the number, the finer the grit. When you sand with a higher grit, you're going to get a finer, smoother finish. So you can use the sanding sponges, you can use sanding sheets, which what I do is I will cut them in half, and then I will take one half of the sheet and fold it in thirds, and I'll just sand the wall with my hand. You can also take one of these and apply it to a pad that's about this large, and then you can attach that to a broom handle or a paint stick, and you can sand the walls with a stick. That's a lot less labor intensive for your body, and you don't get quite as sore and your wrists don't hurt as much. But again, that's another tool you would have to purchase. Don't worry about that today. I'll show you more about those tools in the sanding video. But for right now, you know you have to prep the walls. You have to get them sanded. And then what you need to do is you need to prime them. I don't have a gallon of primer with me right now. I did not bring that into the room with me, but you can just buy a gallon of any type of paint primer at the store you want. Just ask the sales clerk for a gallon of primer, or you can purchase a paint like this one here that has the primer built into it. So it's primer and paint built in. And if you use that, just keep in mind that you're going to definitely want to put on a decent coat to make sure that covers, because you don't have a primer coat underneath it. All right. So anyway, you're at the point now where you've primed the room. You've put a coat of paint on the room. You've got everything sanded and you put a coat of paint on. I recommend personally that you run over your coat of paint once it's cured. You know, it's able to be painted over again in about an hour. But I would recommend, if you really want that coating to be nice and smooth and nice and perfect, to go ahead and wait until it fully cures, 24 hours, and then run over it with like a 240 grit sandpaper to knock down any nubs that might be in the wall or any drips that might have been left over from the rolling process or the paint process. You know, just sand it down just a little bit, and then put your second coat of paint on. That's my recommendation. You do not have to do that. The paint, unless it's a semi-gloss. A semi-gloss, on the other hand, because it has so much sheen built into it, when you add a second coat on that without sanding, it can actually sag. That's called sagging, where the paint starts to run off the wall. Sagging occurs when the paint doesn't stick to the surface underneath it. And there are several reasons for that. One, the paint underneath it has so much sheen built into it that it doesn't want to accept more paint, in the case of semi-gloss. Number two, you're working in a very high humidity area, and then the paint might sag off the wall. Or three, you might be applying the paint too thick. In any of those cases, sagging is not a good thing. So when you want to sand your walls in between coats, that's to knock down any minor sagging that might happen in case you put on too much paint. Or it also knocks down any, this is a very slang term, but they call them boogers. Boogers are little pieces of dried paint that might be on your paintbrush or your roller when you're painting. And when you're rolling, even if you use a new roller, you'll notice every once in a while there'll be a little piece stuck on the wall. Sometimes you can get it off with your pinky, but if you don't see it and it stays on there, it will dry under the paint, and now you have to sand it off. So you want to try to keep your eye out for those boogers and get them off the wall with your finger, or if you cannot, you might have to sand that wall down just a little bit before you apply your next coat. All right. So once you've gotten your two coats on, as you saw in the video, your walls are pretty much done. And now you can focus on things like, finishing off the trim, putting stuff back in the room. And there you have it. Your room is now finally painted. But you might be asking, and I want to make sure I add this in there, what are the tools that you would necessarily need? And just the basic tools. Are these all the tools you're going to need? No, but these are the basic tools that you're going to need in order to paint a room. So as I said before, number one, you're going to make sure you have your sandpaper. That's number one, because that's going to help you prep your wall for paint. You want to make sure you have your spackle or your joint compound, to make sure you fix any imperfections in the wall. All right. So all that's done. You're ready to go. What do you need to paint? Well, first off, you're going to need a paint bucket. There's two different options for you right here. This paint bucket here is what we call a cut bucket. A cut bucket is not meant to be used with a roller unless you use a small little 4-inch roller, which you definitely don't want to use on your wall anyway. But this is a cut bucket, and a cut bucket is what you put a little bit of paint in, maybe about that much or so, is what you put your paintbrush in, and that's what you use to cut all of your corners. Okay, so you're going to need a cut bucket. This one is extremely old and caked with a lot of paint because I've had it for years. Yours will probably look a lot nicer and a lot newer. You're going to need a paintbrush. As I mentioned in the paintbrush video that I did several weeks back, you want to use a 2.5-inch angle sash brush. This happens to be an oil brush, but you're going to notice that the brush is going to have an angle to it. Okay, and it's going to have the metal sleeve around it, and then you're going to have an angle on it. And that's what's going to allow you to cut up into your corners and cut along your ceiling line. When you go to purchase one of these, do not buy the cheapest brush you can buy. This brush, for instance, cost me about $30. Now, do you have to buy a $30 brush? No, not necessarily. But this is a good brush, and it keeps its edge very well throughout its entire life as long as you take care of it. Brushes can last for multiple jobs over the course of months or years depending on its use. Now, when you're purchasing the brush, as I said, don't purchase the cheapest one. You don't have to buy the most expensive one. But get yourself a really good brush. Putty is a good example. This one here is a Sherwin-Williams ProVal model. Again, this is oil. And then you also want to consider what the brush is made for. Is it made for oil-based paints, such as this one right here? Or is it made for water-based paints, or what they call latex paints? And that is going to be a lighter colored brush, okay? That brush is made with a material called nylon polyester. Nylon polyester is what you use when you're painting water-based, latex-based paints. Okay, your acrylic, latex enamel. If you see the word latex, you know you're painting with water-based paint. If you see the word alkoyd or oil, then you know you're painting with oil, and you want to make sure you get what's called a China bristle brush. China bristle brushes are more expensive, but they last forever because they never ever go in water. Do not put these in water. Only clean these with paint thinners, lacquer thinner, some sort of solvent other than water. Okay, nylon polyester brushes can be cleaned with regular water, soapy water in a bucket when you're done painting for the day. All right, so you have your paint bucket. And now you have yourself a really good paintbrush. The next thing you're going to need is a rolling bucket or a rolling tray. The rolling bucket is what I recommend, is what I prefer. I never use a rolling tray because it just gets too sloppy, it's too much of a mess, and it just takes up too much space. And there's too much of a possibility of spilling or making a mess everywhere. If you use a bucket, okay, you have a much less chance of making a mess. Get yourself a 5-gallon pail. You can purchase these. If you purchased paint previously, you can use one of those buckets. But if you want to buy a bucket, you can buy one of these at pretty much any store you want. Walmart, Meijer, Menards, Home Depot, whatever you want. They're probably about $5 to pick one up, really. They're not that expensive. They got a handle on them, and they allow you to put whatever amount of paint you need in the bottom for the job that you're going to do. The next thing you're going to need is a roller screen, okay? The roller screen is what you use to get the excess paint off the roller before you put it on the wall. This might run you $8 or $10. They're not that expensive. Okay, and then you're going to also need your roller. Your roller comes in two parts. Okay, your roller comes in the roller skeleton. That's this right here. All right, and then you also have what's called your roller skin, that or roller sleeve, whatever you want to call it. All right, and basically all you got to do, well, when you purchase them, you generally purchase them separately. If you're looking in the store and you see one together as a kit, most likely it's pretty much the cheapest thing you can possibly buy, and I would avoid it. Buy yourself a roller skeleton and a skin and buy them separately. Now your skins come in different thicknesses. You can buy a 1/4 inch nap. Nap is the amount of fiber that's on the outside of the skin. Okay, you can buy a 1/4 inch nap, a 3/8 inch nap, a 1/2 inch nap, a 5/8 inch nap. This happens to be a 5/8 inch nap. It's already been used once. That's why it doesn't look too fluffy. You can even buy a 1 inch nap if you want. And those buggers are thick, man. I'm telling you, these things are thick. All right, but that's going to determine how much paint your roller is going to hold when it gets from the bucket to the wall. Okay, now if you're painting a flat surface like a wall in your house, you do not need a 1 inch nap because you don't need that much paint going on the wall. When would you use a 1 inch nap? Maybe if you're painting brick, something super porous where you're going to need a lot of paint to go on the wall at one time. When you're painting a nice smooth wall that you've already prepped with your sanding and your joint compound because it's smooth, you know you're not going to do that ever again where it's all rough, you know, right? Yeah? Okay. Anyway, you got a nice smooth wall because you follow my direction, so you don't need a 1 inch nap. You can go with a 1/2 inch nap. You can go with at most 5/8 inch nap. Okay, and basically all you do is you purchase one or two of these depending on how big your job is. You purchase one of these. This is your roller skeleton right here, and it just rolls nice and easy, and you just apply them together. That's all you have to do, and it's going to lock in place. There's a little thing on the end right here that helps you to lock it in place. Once it's locked in place, your roller is ready to go. You have your bucket, you have your roller screen, and now you have your roller. And all you do is just, again, I'll go over this more in a painting video, but you just get your paint on your roller and put it on the wall. And those are the tools that you need. Some of the other things that you might need when you purchase your paint, you're going to have the option of getting some paint stirrers. Make sure you pick yourself up a couple of those paint stirrers. They're generally free from the paint store or Home Depot. They give them out for free. That allows you to stir your paint before you use it. Okay? Make sure you pick up one or two of those, at least one for each color you're purchasing. All right. And also make sure you have something to cover your floor. You can use, they have contractor paper, which is like a 3-foot wide roll of paper with some masking tape. You can put that on the floor. I use what's called a drop cloth, which is a thick fabric, and you can lay it down on the floor, and that keeps all the paint off your carpet, off your linoleum, off your hardwood, off your vinyl plank. Use a drop cloth. Okay, and those are pretty much the basic tools that you're going to need to paint your room. You have your bucket, your roller skin, your roller screen, you have a brush, and you have a cut bucket. And then don't forget, you're also going to need your sandpaper and your joint compound. And of course, buy your paint, buy your drop cloth, and pick up a couple of paint sticks. And that's all you're going to need to paint your room. I'm really glad that you followed along with me today. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. I hope this helps you get started in getting your room painted. And for some people, this is old hat information you've painted 100 times. But then there's some folks out there who have never painted before, and maybe they just bought their house. And if that's you, I really hope this helps you. So please, jump into this project, enjoy it, Try it out, see if you like it. Painting is a joy for me. I've been doing it for well over 20 years, and I absolutely love the way my walls look when they're done. So thank you again for watching me today, and please check out some of these other videos if you get a chance. Got a couple of them here. You can see some of my old previous videos from this bathroom, and I am just so happy that you tuned in today. So y'all have a great day, and God bless you.